Whenever I listen back to something that I do, it just makes me feel weird.
No one expected a quiet, trembling British girl to walk onto one of America's biggest stages and completely shatter every expectation in the room. When Courtney Hadwin first appeared on America's Got Talent, she didn't look like a future star. She looked nervous, fragile, almost invisible. Her shoulders were tense, her voice barely audible when she spoke to the judges. Some in the audience didn't even know what to think. But then the music started, and in a matter of seconds, everything changed. That single performance didn't just shock the judges. It rewrote Courtney's life forever. Fame arrived instantly, violently, and without warning. Cheers echoed across the auditorium, millions watched from home, and a global audience crowned her as something extraordinary. But behind the applause, behind the viral clips and standing ovations, a far more painful story was quietly unfolding. This is not just a story of talent. It's a story of pressure, sacrifice, and a young girl forced to grow up under a spotlight that never turned off. Before the world knew her name, Courtney Hadwin was simply a girl from Hartlepool, County Durham, born on July 6, 2004. She wasn't raised in luxury or surrounded by fame. She grew up in a modest home where music filled the air, not as a career plan, but as a way of life. Her parents noticed early on that there was something different about her voice. It wasn't polished or gentle. It was raw, loud, emotional, the kind of voice that carried pain and power far beyond her years. Music became her refuge. While other children played freely, Courtney practiced. While classmates relaxed, she trained. Her siblings also shared musical interests, but Courtney's obsession ran deeper. It wasn't about attention, it was about expression. Even at a young age, she struggled to communicate through words. Music became the only place where she felt fully understood. She was raised in a quiet village in northeast England, far removed from fame and flashing lights. It was peaceful, isolated, and safe. That environment allowed her talent to grow, but it also meant she was unprepared for what would come later. School was never her priority, not because she didn't care, but because music consumed her completely. She joined theater programs, vocal schools, and master classes. Every spare hour was spent refining her voice, her movements, her stage presence. But this dedication came at a cost. Courtney wasn't chasing fame for fun. She chased it because she felt she had no other choice. She practiced relentlessly, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. There were moments when her determination crossed into desperation. She even sang on the streets to earn money for lessons, something few people ever talk about. While the world would later label her an overnight success, the truth was far darker. She paid for that success with time, comfort, and a normal childhood. Her first major taste of competition came when she entered Teen Star in Newcastle. She didn't win, but winning wasn't the point anymore. The audience felt something when she sang. Judges remembered her. People talked. That was enough to keep her going. It was the moment she realized that her voice could move people, and that realization changed everything. Then came The Voice Kids UK. When Courtney stepped onto that stage, she wasn't just singing, she was transforming. Her performances were explosive, unpredictable, and intense. She didn't sing like a child. She sang like someone who had lived through pain. Inspired by legendary performers known for their raw energy, she began moving differently, performing differently, becoming someone entirely new when the music played. But behind the scenes, the pressure was building. Every performance raised expectations. Every appearance demanded more. She was no longer just Courtney. She was the girl with that crazy voice. Adults praised her, audiences cheered, but no one asked how she was coping. She was still a teenager, emotionally vulnerable, mentally unprepared for the weight being placed on her shoulders. When the opportunity to audition for America's Got Talent arrived, the decision was massive. crossing the ocean, stepping onto the world's biggest stage, and facing the harshest critics imaginable. It was terrifying. But Courtney believed this was where she belonged. Not because it was easy, but because it was the ultimate test. Her AGT audition would become one of the most unforgettable moments in the show's history. As she walked onto the stage, her body language told a different story than her reputation. She looked scared. The judges questioned her song choice. The crowd seemed unsure. And for a brief moment, it felt like everything could collapse right there. But when the music started, the fear disappeared. What followed wasn't just a performance, it was a release. Courtney exploded with energy. Her voice tore through the theater with grit and confidence that stunned everyone watching. The same girl who could barely speak seconds earlier now commanded the stage like a seasoned rock icon. The audience leapt to their feet. Judges stared in disbelief. In that moment, she wasn't shy. She was unstoppable. That audition changed her life overnight. Clips of her performance spread across the internet. Millions watched. Headlines praised her as a phenomenon. She returned to school as a celebrity. Strangers recognized her. Expectations skyrocketed. But fame doesn't ask permission, especially when it comes suddenly. Behind closed doors, the reality was far less glamorous. Courtney struggled with anxiety. The pressure to live up to her own viral moment became overwhelming. Each new performance carried the fear of disappointment. The joy of singing slowly turned into responsibility. She wasn't just performing for herself anymore. She was performing for the world. As the competition progressed, she pushed herself harder. Her quarterfinal performance proved she could dominate the stage. Judges praised her confidence. The audience adored her. But few noticed the emotional weight she carried into every performance. She was growing, but she was also cracking under the surface. By the time she reached the semifinals and finals, Courtney had already given more than most adults ever could. Even though she didn't win the competition, the show left a permanent mark on her life. Fame had lifted her, but it had also exposed her to pressures she was never meant to face so young. And when the spotlight dimmed, the real battle began. Because surviving America's Got Talent wasn't the end of Courtney Hadwin's story. It was the beginning of something far more difficult. When America's Got Talent ended, the world assumed Courtney Hadwin had won something far greater than a trophy. Fame, recognition, a future written in bright lights. From the outside, it looked like the beginning of everything she had ever dreamed of. But, for Courtney, it marked the start of the hardest chapter of her life. One no standing ovation could protect her from. After the cameras shut off, something changed. For months, Courtney had lived in a whirlwind. Every week came with rehearsals, pressure, interviews, expectations, and the constant need to prove herself again and again. On stage, she was powerful. Off stage, she was still a teenager, trying to understand who she was in a world that suddenly demanded more than she could give. When the show ended, that structure vanished overnight. The schedule disappeared, the adrenaline faded, and the silence was deafening. Fame doesn't slowly ease into your life, it crashes in. And when it leaves, it doesn't gently step away, it drops you. Courtney returned home carrying a reputation far heavier than her age. People expected her to be fearless, confident, and unstoppable at all times. But that wasn't who she was. The shy girl who once hid behind her hair was still there, now battling anxiety, self-doubt, and exhaustion. The difference was that now, millions were watching. Social media became both a gift and a curse. Praise poured in, but so did criticism. Every appearance was judged, every silence was questioned. When she wasn't constantly releasing music or appearing on television, people began to ask where she had gone. Some assumed she had failed. Others claimed she had wasted her moment. Very few considered that she might simply be struggling to survive the weight of it all. Behind closed doors, Courtney faced a brutal reality. She had grown up too fast. Her childhood had been sacrificed to preparation, competition, and performance. While others her age were discovering themselves slowly, Courtney had already been branded, categorized, and defined by the public. The version of her that people loved existed mostly on stage. But who was she, without the lights, without the music, without the applause? That question haunted her. Performing had once been her escape. Now, it felt like an obligation. The same energy that once came naturally now required immense effort. Anxiety crept in before performances. Doubt followed her everywhere. The pressure to live up to her AGT persona became suffocating. She wasn't just expected to be good. She was expected to be extraordinary every single time. And that expectation can break even the strongest adults. Courtney did continue to perform. She returned for special appearances, including a major comeback, where she reminded the world of her undeniable talent. The applause came back, the praise followed, but something was different. The joy wasn't the same. The hunger had been replaced with caution. Every step forward came with fear of falling short. Then came the long silences. Months passed without major releases. Public appearances became rare. Fans worried. Critics speculated. Rumors spread. Some said she had disappeared. Others claimed she couldn't handle fame. What no one truly understood was that Courtney was trying to rebuild herself, away from expectations, away from the noise, away from a version of herself she had been forced to become too young. The entertainment industry rarely shows mercy to child stars. You're either constantly visible, or you're forgotten. There's no space to pause, no room to heal. Courtney found herself caught between those two extremes. When she stepped back, people assumed the worst. When she stepped forward, the pressure returned instantly. It became a cycle with no escape. Her struggle wasn't about talent. It never was. It was about identity, about trying to understand who she was when she wasn't performing someone else's expectations. She had to relearn how to sing for herself, not for judges, cameras, or viral moments. That process is lonely. Courtney didn't collapse publicly. There was no dramatic breakdown, no headlines screaming scandal. Instead, her tragedy unfolded quietly, through absence, through silence, through a slow retreat from the world that once demanded everything from her. And in many ways, that made it more painful. Because quiet struggles are the ones people ignore the most. Even today, her name still sparks debate. Some remember her as a once-in-a-generation talent. Others see her as a what could have been. But very few recognize the truth. Courtney Hadwin didn't fail. She survived something most people never could. She survived early fame. She survived pressure. She survived being labeled before she even understood herself. And survival doesn't always look like success. Sometimes, it looks like choosing peace over applause. Sometimes it means letting the world forget you so you can remember who you are. Courtney's story isn't tragic because she lost a competition. It's tragic because she was forced to carry the weight of expectation far too young. Because the world fell in love with a version of her created in seconds, while the real girl behind that performance was left to figure everything out alone. But her story isn't over. If anything, it's unfinished. Because when Courtney Hadwin sings, not for fame, not for judges, not for validation, but for herself, that's when her voice is most powerful. And maybe one day, when the timing is right and the pressure is gone, the world won't see a comeback. It will see something far more important. A young woman who took back her voice.